The worst night of Charlotte's life started with a rejection that made her the laughingstock of the court and ended with the Alpha King declaring her his mate. She thought she understood why. But she was wrong about the king's motives, just like she was wrong about the general and wrong about her brother's disappearance. Years later, they'd still be telling stories about what happened that night, though none of them would get it quite right. Charlotte watched the general's hand close around Lady Bellamy's waist, and the crowd's laughter felt like shards of glass sliding under her skin. She shouldn't have come. Should have known better than to believe his whispered promises, the way he'd traced her collarbone in the darkness of the stables 3 nights ago and sworn she was different. Special. Worth the risk. But General Alec Harrow wasn't touching her now. Wasn't even looking at her as he pulled the blonde beauty closer, his mouth curved in that devastating smile Charlotte had foolishly thought was hers alone. Lady Bellamy preened under his attention, her silk gown shimmering in the candlelight of the grand hall. "Did you really think he'd choose you?" Charlotte turned to find Vivian Matthews at her elbow, the merchant's daughter who'd made tormenting Charlotte a personal hobby. Her words carried just far enough to reach the cluster of nobles nearby, and their eyes swiveled toward Charlotte with predatory interest. "A stable. Han's daughter," Vivian continued. "How adorable. Did you seriously believe a man like General Harrow would claim someone who smells like horse manure?" The laughter started small, a snicker from Lord Pemberton, a giggle from his wife. Then it spread like wildfire through the crowd. Charlotte felt her cheeks burn, her hands clenching in the rough fabric of her borrowed dress. She'd spent her last wages on the pale green muslin, had stayed up until dawn hemming it by candlelight, hoping. God, she was an idiot. Alec finally looked at her. Their eyes met across the gleaming ballroom floor, and for one breathless moment, she thought she saw regret flicker across his handsome face. An apology, maybe. Recognition of what he'd promised her in the dark. Then his gaze slid away, dismissive, like she was nothing. "Excuse me," Charlotte managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned toward the exit, desperate to escape before the tears burning behind her eyes spilled over and gave them all even more to mock. She'd made it 3 steps when the massive double doors at the far end of the hall slammed open. The laughter died instantly. Everyone turned as a man stepped through the entrance, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a predator's fluid grace that made the general's military bearing look small by comparison. He wore black leather and dark wool, no crown or royal regalia, but Charlotte knew who he was immediately. Everyone did. Roman Lancaster, the Alpha King, and he was staring directly at her. The crowd parted like water as he crossed the ballroom floor. Charlotte had never seen him up close, only glimpsed him once from a distance during a royal procession 5 years ago. But the stories about him were practically legend. He'd unified 3 fractious packs through a combination of brutal efficiency and unexpected mercy. He'd survived 2 assassination attempts and hanged the conspirators himself. They also said he had eyes like molten amber and a smile that could stop your heart. Charlotte wasn't sure about the smile. His expression was unreadable as he approached, but the eyes were accurate. They pinned her in place, intense and searching, like he could see straight through to her bones. He stopped directly in front of her. The entire hall held its breath. "Charlotte Brennan," he said, and his voice was deep, rough-edged. She managed a jerky nod, her throat too tight for words. Roman's gaze flicked briefly to Alec, then back to her. Something dangerous flickered across his features, there and gone so fast she almost missed it. Then he reached out, his hand extended palm up in the formal gesture of claiming. "You're coming with me." The hall erupted. Gasps, whispers, a few shocked exclamations. Charlotte stared at his outstretched hand. Pardon me?" "You heard me." His amber eyes held hers, steady and certain. "Take my hand, Charlotte. Your Majesty, I don't understand. You will, but not here. His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. Trust me. Please. There was something in his tone, not quite desperation, but close. Charlotte glanced back at Alec. He'd gone pale, his arm dropping from Lady Bellamy's waist. Their eyes met, and she saw it clearly now, calculation mixed with fear. Whatever game he'd been playing, the Alpha King's arrival had just upended the board. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video if you want more stories like this. She looked back at Roman's waiting hand. This couldn't be real. Kings didn't rescue stable girls. But screw it. What did she have to lose? Charlotte placed her palm against his, and the contact sent a shock of heat up her arm. Roman's fingers closed around hers, firm, warm, possessive, and he pulled her close to his side. The move was smooth, practiced, like he'd done it 1,000 times. She's under my protection now, Roman announced to the room, his voice carrying effortlessly. Anyone who speaks against her speaks against me. Anyone who harms her answers to me. Is that understood? Silence, then a wave of hasty bows and curtsies. Roman didn't wait for more. He turned, keeping Charlotte's hand firmly in his, and walked toward the exit. She had to half jog to keep up with his longer stride, very aware of hundreds of eyes tracking their departure. They made it outside before she found her voice again. What was that about? Roman didn't slow down, steering her toward a massive black horse that waited by the courtyard fountain. That was me keeping you alive. Keeping me... What are you talking about? He finally stopped, turning to face her. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, easily a head taller than her, with shoulders that seemed designed to carry the weight of a kingdom. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling against his collar, and there was a scar cutting through his right eyebrow that somehow made him more attractive instead of less. How much do you know about why General Harrow was courting you? Roman asked. Charlotte's face heated. He wasn't courting me. We were just... She stopped, unwilling to admit the humiliating truth to a stranger, even if that stranger was the king. Sleeping together? Roman supplied bluntly. I know. And I know he approached you first, 6 weeks ago, at the market. Started with casual conversation, worked his way up to stolen moments. Made you feel special. Charlotte's stomach dropped. How do you... Because I've been watching you for 3 months. The admission should have scared her. Instead, she felt a strange flutter in her chest. Why? Roman's jaw tightened. It's complicated. But the relevant part is this. Alec Harrow was using you. He's been working for someone who wants information about your brother. All the air left Charlotte's lungs. Kieran? Yes. Kieran, her brilliant, reckless, infuriating brother who disappeared 2 years ago. One day he'd been there, working as a junior clerk in the Royal Archives, complaining about tedious filing systems and boring documents, and the next, he was gone. No note, no goodbye, just an empty room and a hole in Charlotte's life that never stopped aching. The official story was that he'd run off with a woman. Debts, maybe. The Royal Guard had investigated for 3 weeks, found nothing, and declared it a voluntary disappearance. What does Alec want with Kieran? She demanded. Not what. Where? Roman glanced around the courtyard, then back at her. I need you to come with me. Somewhere we can talk privately. I'll explain everything. You expect me to just trust you? I don't know you. No, you don't. His expression softened slightly. But you know Alec, and look how that turned out. I'm offering you the truth, Charlotte, and protection. What you do with it after is your choice. The defiant part of her wanted to insist that could take care of herself, that she didn't need some arrogant king swooping in to rescue her. But the truth was, she'd been floundering for 2 years, working herself to exhaustion, at the stables, spending every spare moment searching for clues about Kieran, and getting exactly nowhere. If Roman actually knew something? Fine, she said. But if this is some elaborate scheme to kidnap me or something, I'm kicking you in the balls first chance I get. Roman's mouth twitched. Almost a smile, but not quite. Noted. He helped her onto the horse, his touch careful, impersonal, then swung up behind her. Charlotte stiffened as his chest pressed against her back, his arms coming around her to grip the reins. Relax, he murmured near her ear. I'm not going to hurt you. Easy for you to say. You're not the one being abducted. This time he did smile. She felt it against her temple. Hold on. The horse launched forward, and Charlotte grabbed the saddle horn with a yelp. Roman's arm tightened around her waist, steadying her, and they galloped through the city streets toward the northern gate. Roman's fortress was carved into the mountainside an hour's ride from the capital, all dark stone and sharp angles, with towers that seemed to grow from the rock itself. Charlotte had heard stories about it, but had never imagined she'd actually see it up close. A woman met them in the courtyard, tall, with silver-threaded dark hair and the kind of face that was striking rather than beautiful. This is Maggie, Roman said as he helped Charlotte down. She runs the household. Maggie, this is Charlotte Brennan. Guest room, please, and have food sent up. Maggie's shrewd eyes assessed Charlotte for a long moment. Then she nodded. This way, dear. Wait, Charlotte said, turning back to Roman. You said you'd explain? I will, after you've eaten and had a chance to catch your breath. Roman's tone was firm. Give me an hour. Before Charlotte could protest, Maggie had her elbow and was steering her inside. The fortress interior was surprisingly warm, fires blazing in hearths, tapestries softening stone walls, the smell of bread and roasted meat wafting from somewhere nearby. The guest room was twice the size of Charlotte's quarters above the stables, with a bed piled high with furs and a window overlooking the mountains. There's water for washing, Maggie said, gesturing to a basin and pitcher. And fresh clothes in the wardrobe if you'd like to change. His Majesty will send for you shortly. She left before Charlotte could ask any of the 1,000 questions burning in her mind. Charlotte washed mechanically, her thoughts spinning. Roman had been watching her. For 3 months. Why? And what did he know about Kieran? She changed out of the borrowed dress into simple trousers and a tunic from the wardrobe. Both fit surprisingly well, like they'd been made for her. That thought sent a shiver down her spine. How long had he been planning this? Food arrived shortly after. Roasted chicken, vegetables, bread, and wine. Charlotte forced herself to eat despite her churning stomach. She'd learned years ago not to waste food when it was offered. The knock came just as she finished. She opened the door to find Roman, now dressed in plain dark trousers and a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Somehow, he looked more dangerous without the formal leathers. Walk with me, he said. He led her through corridors and up a winding staircase to the battlements. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. They were alone up here, just wind and stone, and the vast expanse of sky. Your brother didn't run away, Roman said without preamble. He discovered something in the archives, something that certain people would kill to keep hidden. Charlotte's hands clenched on the stone wall. What kind of something? Evidence of a treaty. One signed 25 years ago between my father and the Eastern Kingdom of Valdine. Roman's expression was grim. The treaty included unsavory clauses, territorial concessions that would effectively cede control of our eastern provinces, trade agreements that heavily favored Valdine, and a marriage contract. A marriage contract? Between me and the Valdine princess? Roman's jaw tightened. I was 5 years old when it was signed. I had no say in it, no knowledge of it. My father never told me. Charlotte frowned. But you're not married. No, because my father regretted the treaty almost immediately. He spent the next 20 years trying to quietly undermine it, making it impossible for Valdine to enforce the terms. When he died, I assumed whatever political entanglements he'd left behind died with him. Roman's amber eyes met hers. I was wrong. Valdine has been waiting, building their case, and 2 years ago, they found proof that the treaty still legally binds me. So, Kieran found the treaty? Charlotte breathed. Yes. He came to me directly, told me what he'd discovered. Smart kid. He knew the implications immediately. If Valdine could prove the treaty's validity, they could force me into compliance. Either I marry their princess and hand over effective control of the kingdom, or they have grounds to declare war for breach of contract. Charlotte's mind raced. So you hid the documents? Destroyed them? No. I sent your brother to secure them, to find every copy, every piece of evidence, and bring it all here where I could figure out how to handle it. Roman's expression darkened. He never returned. Neither did the documents. Valdine took him? I believe they grabbed Kieran before he could deliver the evidence to me, and they've been searching for where he hid it ever since. Then why come after me? I don't know anything about— Charlotte stopped. The ledger. Roman nodded slowly. What ledger? Kieran gave me a ledger. Week before he disappeared. Charlotte's heart pounded. He said it was just accounts from his work, asked me to hold on to it for him. I thought it was strange, but I didn't question it. After he vanished, I looked through it. Just seemed like boring financial records, grain purchases, tax collections, trade manifests. You still have it? Hidden in the stables, under a loose floorboard in the tack room. She looked at Roman. You think that's what they're looking for? I think your brother was clever enough to disguise the treaty evidence as something mundane. And I think Valdine's agents finally figured out he might have given you something. Roman's hand flexed on the stone. Alec Harrow is Valdine's man. Has been for years, probably. He was ordered to get close to you, gain your trust, find out what you know. The humiliation of the ballroom scene crashed back over Charlotte. So tonight? Was him discarding you? Once he realized you genuinely didn't know anything useful, you became a liability. Better to publicly cut ties, make you look foolish and desperate so no one would believe you if you started talking. Fury burned through Charlotte's chest. She'd been used, played, made to feel special when she was nothing but a means to an end. What do you want from me? She asked quietly. I need that ledger, and I need you safe while I figure out how to deal with Valdine. Roman turned to face her fully. Which is why I claimed you tonight. Claimed me? As my mate. Charlotte's stomach flipped. But that's not. I know. His voice was carefully neutral. Mate bonds are rare, real ones at least, but claiming one is easy. All it takes is public declaration and intent, which I provided tonight. Charlotte's chest tightened. There it was. Her second rejection of the night. First Alec discarding her, now Roman admitting the claim was just political theater. At least he was being honest about it. That should count for something. But it didn't stop the sharp ache blooming in her chest. So it's all a lie, she said quietly. No. Roman's eyes flashed. I protected you. The moment I declared you under my protection as a potential mate, you became untouchable. Valdine can't harm you without risking open war. No one in my kingdom would dare touch you. You're safe, Charlotte. That's what matters. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Her hands trembled, frustration and grief mixing until she couldn't tell them apart. If you knew Valdine took Kieran, if you knew I might have information, why wait 2 years? Why let me think he abandoned me? Because I was trying to keep you alive. Roman's voice was rough. I've known about you since the week Kieran disappeared. I had people watching you, making sure you were safe. Charlotte's breath caught. You've been watching me, protecting you, from a distance. His jaw tightened. As long as Valdine thought you were irrelevant, just a grieving sister who knew nothing, you were safe. The moment I approached you, the moment I showed interest, I'd be painting a target on your back, telling them you mattered. So you let me grieve alone instead. Yes, I let you grieve. I let you search. I let you hurt. Because the alternative was risking your life. His eyes held hers. I've been watching Valdine's movements for 2 years, Charlotte. Waiting for them to make a mistake, to reveal where they're holding Kieran. I couldn't risk approaching you before I had a plan, before I could guarantee I could protect you from what would come next. So why now? Now that Alec has been circling you for 6 weeks, I know they've made the connection. They know Kieran might have given you something, and they're closing in. Roman's hands flexed. At this point, staying away became more dangerous than stepping in. So here we are. Charlotte wanted to rage at him for the 2 years of helpless searching, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep wondering if Kieran was alive or dead. But she also understood survival, understood making hard choices to keep people safe. She told herself to focus. Are you here to make me a deal? Yes, help me find the treaty documents. Testify about what your brother told you. Help me decode that ledger. In exchange, I'll keep searching for Kieran, using every resource I have. And when this is over, when Valdine is dealt with, I'll give you enough gold to go anywhere. Start fresh. You'll be free. She sighed, trying to process everything she's just learned. Part of her wanted to grab that ledger and run as far from kings and generals and political machinations as possible. But Kieran was out there somewhere, hurt, possibly worse, and she'd been getting nowhere on her own. How long? She asked. This deal of yours, however long it takes to resolve things with Valdine, could be weeks, could be months. Roman held her gaze. I won't lie, it won't be easy. You'll have to play the part publicly, attend events as my intended mate, deal with court politics and scrutiny, but you'll have everything you need, and I'll keep you safe. Charlotte looked out at the darkening mountains, thought about Kieran, brilliant and reckless, who'd always protected her when they were kids, who'd taught her to read and stood up to the bullies and made her laugh when their father died and left them with nothing. She owed him the same. Okay, she said. We have a deal, but I want updates, regular ones, on the search for Kieran. And if I find out you're lying to me about any of this, you'll kick me in the balls. Yes, I remember. That almost smile again. Do we shake on it, or do you need it in writing? I can trust your word. It's all I have. Roman extended his hand. Do we have an agreement? Charlotte hesitated for a beat, then took it, feeling that same jolt of heat as before. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. We have an agreement, she said. Roman's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a brief, almost unconscious gesture that sent awareness skittering up her arm. Then he released her hand and stepped back. Get some rest. Tomorrow we retrieve the ledger and start working. And Charlotte? He paused at the stairway entrance. Thank you for trusting me with this. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the wind and stars and the terrifying realization that she'd just agreed to pretend to be the alpha, King's mate. They retrieved the ledger at dawn, Roman insisting on accompanying her despite Charlotte's protests that she could handle it alone. You're under my protection now, he said as they rode toward the city, which means you don't go anywhere without me or my guards. Not until Valdine backs off. That's going to get old fast. Then I suggest we work quickly. The stables were quiet at this hour, just old Hammond mucking stalls and 2 grooms preparing the morning feed. They all froze when they saw Roman, hastily bowing. Your Majesty, Hammond stammered. We didn't... Is there a problem? No problem. Miss Brennan is collecting her belongings. Roman's tone was pleasant but firm. She'll be residing at the fortress for the foreseeable future. Charlotte caught Hammond's wide-eyed stare as she headed to the tack room. She could only imagine what rumors would be flying through the city by noon. The ledger was exactly where she'd left it, wrapped in oilcloth under the loose board. She pulled it out, brushing off dust, and brought it to Roman. He flipped through it, his expression intent. Your brother was clever. These look like standard trade records, but... He pointed to a column of numbers. See this? Every 3rd entry has an inconsistency. The math doesn't add up. Which means... It's code, Charlotte finished. The errors are intentional. They're pointing to something else. Roman looked at her with something like respect. You're quick. I helped Kieran with his schoolwork for years. I know how he thinks. She took the ledger back, studying the entries more carefully. If these are coded references, we need a key, something that tells us what each number or inconsistency represents. It could be anything. A book, another document, a phrase. Charlotte's mind spun through possibilities. Then something clicked. His initials. Kieran used to make up codes when we were kids, always based on our names or birthdays. If he was in a hurry, he'd fall back on old patterns. They spent the ride back to the fortress testing theories. By the time they arrived, Charlotte had a hypothesis. The inconsistencies spell out coordinates, she said, spreading the ledger on Roman's study table. See? If you take every 3rd error and convert it using a letter-number substitution based on Kieran's name, K is 11, I is 9, and so on. The numbers become letters. The letters become locations in the archives. Roman leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell leather and pine. You're right. These correspond to shelf locations, section markers. His voice carried a note of wonder. Your brother was brilliant. He was. Charlotte's throat tightened. He is brilliant. Roman's hand covered hers on the table, brief, steadying. We'll find him. The contact sent heat flooding through her. Charlotte looked up, found Roman's face inches from hers, his amber eyes dark with something she couldn't quite name. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Roman stepped back, clearing his throat. I'll send men to the archives tonight. Quietly. If those shelf locations contain the treaty documents, we can't let Valdine know we've found them. Charlotte nodded, trying to ignore the way her pulse hammered. What do I do? Rest. We have a formal dinner tomorrow night. My council expects to meet you. After that public scene at the ball, everyone will want to see the woman I claimed. His expression was apologetic. I know it's not what you signed up for, but it's fine. I agreed to play the part. Charlotte straightened her shoulders. I can handle a dinner. It won't be easy. Some of the council members are traditional. They'll have opinions about my choice of mate. You mean they'll think I'm beneath you? they would be wrong. Roman's words carried an edge. Half those nobles couldn't decode a children's rhyme, let alone the kind of cipher your brother created. You're not just helping me, you're saving them, whether they're intelligent enough to recognize it or not. The fierce protectiveness in his tone made Charlotte's chest warm. You barely know me. I know enough. He held her gaze. And I'm a decent judge of character. Is that why you've been watching me for 3 months? Roman's expression shifted, became carefully neutral. That's complicated. If we're going to work together, I think you should let go of the secrets, she whispered. Fair point. He moved to pour wine from a decanter, offering her a glass. The truth is, I noticed you at your brother's investigation. You were relentless, demanding updates, refusing to accept the official story, following every possible lead. You reminded me of... He trailed off. Of what? Someone who doesn't give up, even when giving up would be easier. Roman took a drink. I respected that. And when my own investigation into Kieran's disappearance connected him to the treaty documents, I started paying closer attention, making sure you were safe, that Valdine's people weren't circling you. You were protecting me, even before tonight. Someone had to. His eyes met hers over the rim of his glass. You were so focused on finding your brother, you didn't notice the danger you were walking into. Charlotte thought about Alec. The way he'd approached her with that charming smile made her feel seen. She'd been so desperate for connection, for someone to care about her, that she'd missed every warning sign. I was an idiot, she said quietly. You were lonely. Roman's voice was gentle, but his eyes had gone dark, that amber gaze dropping to her mouth for just a heartbeat before returning to meet hers. There's a difference. The look sent heat curling through Charlotte's stomach. For a wild moment, she wondered what would happen if she closed the distance between them. If she... No, she shut down that thought immediately. He'd just told her the mate bond was political convenience. Whatever she was reading in his expression was wishful thinking on her part, nothing more. She'd already made a fool of herself once with Alec. She wouldn't repeat the mistake with a king. I should rest, she said, taking a deliberate step back. If I'm meeting your council tomorrow, I need to be sharp. Something that looked like disappointment flickered across Roman's face, but it was gone before she could be sure. He nodded slowly. Maggie will help you prepare. And Charlotte? He waited until she looked at him. You're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, you have my support, my protection, all of it. The words felt like a promise. Charlotte wanted to believe them, wanted to trust that this arrangement could be more than just political convenience. But Roman had admitted himself. This was a deal. When it was over, she'd walk away. She needed to remember that. The council dinner was exactly as terrible as Charlotte had feared. Maggie had dressed her in deep emerald silk, styled her hair in an elaborate braid, and given her a crash course in formal etiquette. But no amount of preparation could make Charlotte feel like she belonged at a table full of nobles. Roman sat at the head, with Charlotte at his right hand. The council members filled the remaining seats, 8 men and women whose expressions ranged from curious to openly hostile. So, said Lord Garrett, a portly man with calculating eyes, Miss Brennan, your father was a stable master, I understand? He was. Charlotte kept her voice steady. And a good one. I'm sure. But surely your Majesty sees the difficulty in this match? Garrett addressed Roman now, not even bothering to hide his disdain. The bloodlines alone. They're irrelevant, Roman cut in, his tone dangerous. Charlotte is my chosen mate. That's all the bloodline that matters. But the kingdom expects me to lead, which I'm doing. Roman's eyes were cold. Are you questioning my judgment, Garrett? The Lord paled. Of course not, Your Majesty. An older woman with sharp features leaned forward. What Lord Garrett means is that we're concerned about the suddenness of this bond. You've shown no interest in taking a mate for years, Roman. Forgive our surprise that you've now claimed one after a single evening. Mate bonds happen when they happen, Lady Danbury, Roman said smoothly. I'm not going to apologize for recognizing mine. Charlotte felt his hand find hers under the table, squeezing gently. The touch was clearly for show, reassuring the council that they were united, but the warmth of his palm against hers sent her pulse racing anyway. Tell us about yourself, Miss Brennan, suggested a younger man with copper hair. He seemed genuinely curious rather than hostile. What are your interests? Besides surviving your hospitality? Charlotte said before she could stop herself. There was a beat of shocked silence. Then Roman laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed his face. Several council members looked startled, like they'd never heard their king laugh before. I like her, the copper-haired man said, grinning. She's got spine. That she does, Roman agreed, his thumb stroking the back of Charlotte's hand. The casual intimacy of the gesture made her breath catch. He was good at pretending. She had to give him that. The dinner continued with slightly less tension. Charlotte fielded questions about her upbringing, her work, her thoughts on kingdom politics. She kept her answers honest but careful, very aware that every word was being weighed and judged. By the time dessert arrived, her head was pounding. Roman must have noticed, because he leaned close and murmured, "Almost done." "You're doing beautifully." His breath against her ear sent shivers down her spine. Charlotte turned to respond and found his face inches from hers, his eyes dark and intense in the candlelight. For a moment, the entire room seemed to fade. There was just Roman, looking at her like she was the only person who existed, his hand warm in hers, and his scent surrounding her, leather and pine and something uniquely him. Then someone cleared their throat, and the spell broke. Roman pulled back, but his hand stayed in hers. If there's nothing else, we'll retire for the evening. No one objected. Roman helped Charlotte from her chair, his hand moving to the small of her back as he guided her from the dining hall. The possessive touch was probably for the council's benefit, but Charlotte's body didn't seem to care about motives. It responded to the heat of his palm through silk, the solid presence of him beside her. They made it to the corridor before she spoke. That was awful. You handled it perfectly, Charlotte. No, I'm pretty sure they hate me. Some of them do. Others are reserving judgment. And a few, like Marcus, the one with copper hair, actually like you. Roman's hand was still on her back, and he didn't seem inclined to move it. You impress them, Charlotte, whether they want to admit it or not. I'm exhausted, I know. He steered her toward her room. Rest. The documents, my men, retrieved from the archives, need to be analyzed, which I can handle. You've done enough for now. They stopped at her door. Roman's hand slid away from her back, and Charlotte immediately missed the warmth. Thank you, she said, for defending me. I meant what I said. You're under my protection. That includes from my own counsel. Roman's expression softened. Get some sleep. He turned to leave, but Charlotte caught his wrist. Wait. Roman looked back, surprised. Charlotte didn't let herself overthink it. She rose on her toes and pressed a kiss to his cheek. Brief, chaste, a simple thank you. Except the moment her lips touched his skin, she felt the sharp intake of his breath. Roman went very still, every muscle locked, and she realized with a jolt that her hand had found his chest for balance. Beneath her palm, his heart was racing. Charlotte pulled back slowly, found him staring at her with an intensity that stole her breath, his amber eyes molten. "Charlotte," he said, and his voice was rough, warning or plea, she couldn't tell. "Good night, Roman," she whispered. She slipped into her room and closed the door, leaning against it with her heart pounding. From the other side, she heard him exhale slowly, a shaky, controlled breath that sounded almost pained. Then footsteps, retreating down the corridor. Charlotte touched her lips, wondering what she was thinking. This was supposed to be a business arrangement, temporary. She couldn't afford to develop actual feelings for the Alpha King. But as she changed into her nightclothes and climbed into bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Roman had looked at her. Like she mattered, like she was worth protecting, worth defending, She shut down that train of thought. It didn't matter what Roman's eyes promised. When this was over, she'd take her gold and leave. Find Kieran, start fresh somewhere safe and quiet where no one knew her name. That was the plan. Kieran had disappeared because he'd gotten too close to the crown, because people like them didn't survive in places like this. They weren't built for gilded cages and court intrigue. The next 3 weeks fell into a rhythm. Roman worked on decoding the treaty documents while Charlotte helped cross-reference information from the ledger. They spent hours in his study, heads bent over parchment, their fingers occasionally brushing as they reached for the same page. Those accidental touches became more frequent, more deliberate. Roman would lean close to point out a detail, his breath warm against her neck. Charlotte would rest her hand on his shoulder to steady herself as she read over his arm. Small moments of contact that shouldn't have meant anything, but always left her pulse racing. And then there were the public appearances. 3 more formal dinners. A garden party where Roman kept his hand on her waist the entire time. A council meeting where he'd pulled her chair closer to his and let their thighs press together under the table. All for show, Charlotte told herself. They were selling the mate bond illusion. But sometimes, late at night when she was alone, she wondered if Roman was as unaffected as he pretended. Their breakthrough came on the 24th day. "I've got it," Roman said, his voice sharp with excitement. Charlotte looked up from the ledger to find him staring at a document with wide eyes. The treaty documents. Your brother found all of them. Every single clause, every signature, every piece of evidence Valdine could use against us. That's good, right? It's better than good. Because he also found something else. Roman slid a second parchment across the desk. An addendum. Signed by my father and the Valdine king 2 years before my father died. It voids the original treaty. Charlotte's breath caught. Does this mean you're free? We're free. The kingdom, the marriage contract, all of it. Roman's smile was fierce, triumphant. Valdine has no claim. We can reject their demands outright. Then why? Didn't your father tell you about this? I don't know. Maybe he died before he got the chance. Maybe he kept it hidden as insurance, in case Valdine tried something. Roman stood, pacing with barely contained energy. It doesn't matter. What matters is we have proof. We can end this. Charlotte should have felt relieved, victorious. Instead, something cold settled in her stomach. So the deal is done, she said quietly. You don't need me anymore. Roman stopped pacing, looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Charlotte. A sharp knock interrupted whatever he'd been about to say. Roman's second in command, Marcus, entered without waiting for permission. Your Majesty, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Valdine's ambassador is here. He's demanded an immediate audience. Marcus's expression was grim. And he's brought General Harrow with him. The throne room was packed. Word had spread quickly that Valdine's ambassador was confronting the Alpha King, and half the court had turned out to witness it. Charlotte stood beside Roman's throne, very aware of hundreds of eyes on her. Alec Harrow was there too, standing behind the ambassador with his expression carefully blank. Their eyes met briefly. Charlotte saw recognition, calculation, and something that might have been regret before he looked away. Ambassador Henrik stepped forward, a tall man with silver hair and cold blue eyes. "Your Majesty, I come bearing a message from King Aldrich of Valdine." "I'm listening," Roman said, his voice deceptively calm. "King Aldrich has grown concerned by reports of your domestic situation." Henrik's gaze flicked to Charlotte. "Specifically, your claim of a mate bond with Miss Brennan. We find this timing suspicious, given that the treaty your father signed includes a marriage clause binding you to Princess Isadora." "The treaty is void," Roman said flatly. "I'm afraid not. We have thoroughly researched the legal standing, and the contract remains binding." Henrik produced a rolled parchment. "Unless you can provide documented proof of its dissolution, King Aldrich will expect you to honor the terms, including the marriage. And if I refuse, then we will have no choice but to consider it an act of war." Henrik's smile was thin. "I would hate to see bloodshed over a simple contract dispute, especially when compliance would benefit both kingdoms." Charlotte felt Roman's tension next to her. He was holding himself very still, the calm before the storm. "You want proof?" Roman said softly. "Fine. Charlotte, the documents." Charlotte had been carrying them in a leather satchel, as Roman had instructed. She pulled out the addendum, hands shaking slightly, and gave it to Roman. He held it up for the room to see. "This is an addendum to the original treaty, signed by both kings, witnessed and sealed. It explicitly voids all previous terms, including the marriage clause, which means your king has no claim on me or my kingdom." Henrik's confident expression faltered. "Let me see that." Roman descended from the throne and handed it over. The ambassador examined it closely, his frown deepening. Charlotte watched Alec's face go pale. "This is unexpected," Henrik admitted. "Where did you find this? That's not your concern. What matters is, it's legally binding." Roman's voice carried through the room. "Valdine's claims are baseless. The treaty is void. And if your king wishes to dispute that, he can take it up with the continental courts, where he'll lose." Henrik looked like he'd swallowed something sour. "King Aldrich will need time to verify this document's authenticity. He can take all the time he wants, but he'll do it from his own kingdom." Roman's eyes were cold. "You have 3 days to leave my lands. If you're still here after that, I'll consider it an act of aggression." The threat was clear. Henrik knew it. The court knew it. The ambassador gave a stiff bow and retreated, Alec following like a whipped dog. The moment they left, the throne room erupted in excited chatter. Roman turned to Charlotte, and the look on his face made her heart skip. "We did it," he said. "You did it. We did it together." Roman's hand found hers, squeezing tight. "None of this would have been possible without you." The room was watching them. Charlotte was suddenly acutely aware that their deal was done. The treaty was void, Valdine was handled, and she was technically free to leave with her gold, except she didn't want to leave, not without Kieran. "Roman," she started. "Not here," he murmured. "Later. We'll talk later." But later never came, because that night, everything went wrong. Charlotte was in her room, changing for dinner, when she heard the screams. She ran to the window and saw smoke rising from the eastern courtyard. Shouts echoed through the fortress, men yelling orders, the clash of steel on steel. They were under attack. Charlotte grabbed a knife from her dressing table and ran into the corridor. Chaos greeted her. Guards rushing past. Servants fleeing. She caught a young maid by the arm. "What's happening?" "Valdine forces! They breach the eastern wall." Charlotte's blood turned to ice. Henrik must have anticipated Roman's move, must have had soldiers waiting nearby. This was revenge for the public humiliation. She needed to find Roman. Charlotte navigated through the madness, following the sounds of fighting. She found him in the main courtyard, surrounded by his own warriors but holding his ground against a group of Valdine soldiers, and Alec was with them. "Charlotte, get back inside," Roman roared when he saw her. But it was too late. One of the Valdine soldiers had spotted her, was already moving in her direction. Charlotte raised her knife, but she knew it was useless. She had no training, no way to defend herself against a trained warrior. The soldier lunged. Charlotte braced for impact, but it never came. Roman moved faster than should have been possible, a blur of controlled violence that put himself between Charlotte and the attacker. His hand, no longer entirely human, fingers elongated and tipped with curved claws, tore through the soldier's chest. The man dropped dead before he hit the ground. Roman whirled on Charlotte, his eyes wild, more wolf than man. "You have to get back inside." He grabbed her arm, pulling her behind him as another wave of attackers came. "Marcus, get her to the safe room." Charlotte struggled against Marcus's grip as he materialized beside her. "Roman, please, Charlotte." Roman's voice cut through the chaos, and for a split second his eyes found hers. Still amber, still his beneath the wildness. "I can't fight if I'm worried about you." She wanted to memorize the exact shade of gold in his eyes, the set of his jaw, the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth protecting, as if this might be the last time. Charlotte stopped struggling and let Marcus pull her away, her chest tight with fear. The last thing she saw was Roman, shifting fully, his wolf form massive and deadly, tearing through Valdine's soldiers like they were nothing. Marcus got her to the safe room, a fortified chamber deep in the fortress, and locked the door. "Stay here. Don't open this for anyone but His Majesty or me." Then he was gone, and Charlotte was alone with her terror. The sounds of fighting seemed to last forever. Charlotte paced the small room, knife clutched in white-knuckled hands, imagining every terrible possibility. Roman injured, Roman dead, Roman... The door burst open. Charlotte spun, knife raised, then sagged momentarily with relief. It was Alec. "Is Roman's fine. He sent me to get you." Alec's expression was gentle, concerned. "Come on, it's safe now." Something about his tone felt wrong. "Roman told me not to open the door for anyone but him or Marcus," she said carefully. "Things changed. He's injured. Not badly, but he wants you there. Charlotte, please. We don't have much time." Her heart lurched. But her mind was saying this didn't add up. "What's the injury?" she asked. "Does it matter? Are you coming or not?" "It matters to me. Tell me where he's hurt." Alec's pleasant expression cracked, his left shoulder. A blade caught him. "Are you satisfied?" Charlotte's grip tightened on her knife. Roman is left-handed. He'd never let someone hit his dominant side. Alec's face went cold. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for." He moved fast, but Charlotte was already diving to the side. She felt his hand graze her arm, heard him curse as she scrambled away. "This doesn't have to be difficult," Alec said, circling her like a predator. "Henrik wants you as leverage. Alive, preferably." But he didn't specify what condition. Why? Charlotte's back hit the wall. "The treaty's void. Valdine has no claim." "The treaty was never the point," Alec snarled. "It was about destabilizing Roman, making him weak. And you..." He laughed bitterly. You were supposed to be a distraction, a nobody who'd make him look foolish for claiming. Instead, you made him stronger, gave him something to protect. Charlotte understood then. This wasn't about politics or treaties. This was personal. They wanted to break Roman, and they'd figured out the fastest way to do it was through her. He'll kill you, she said quietly. You know that, right? If you hurt me, Roman will tear you apart, only if he finds out I was involved. Alec lunged again. This time, Charlotte didn't run. She stepped inside his reach and drove her knife up toward his ribs, the exact angle Kieran had drilled into her during their self-defense lessons years ago, the soft spot between bone where a blade could slip in deep. But Alec's hand caught her wrist, twisting until she dropped the blade with a cry of pain. Then he had her, arm locked around her throat, squeezing just enough to cut off her air. She clawed at his forearm. Her lungs burned. She couldn't get air, couldn't get enough. Sorry, Charlotte, he murmured against her ear. You really were special. Under different circumstances. Her vision tunneled, gray creeping in from the edges, swallowing the room. Her legs went weak, until the door exploded inward. Roman stood in the doorway, and Charlotte had never seen anything so terrifying. Still in wolf form, drenched in blood, some of it steaming, some of it already drying black against fur. His eyes burned amber, feral and bright, tracking over the room until they locked on Alec's arm around her throat. The sound that tore from Roman's chest wasn't human, wasn't even animal. It was something ancient and murderous, a promise of violence so absolute that Charlotte felt it in her bones. Alec's arm went slack. For half a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Alec bolted, straight for the window. He crashed through it in an explosion of shattered glass and disappeared into the night. Charlotte collapsed to her knees, gasping, her throat on fire. The world tilted sideways, and suddenly Roman was there, shifting back mid-stride, catching her before she hit the floor. You're okay, he said, his hands running over her frantically, checking for injuries. You're okay, you're... I'm all right, Charlotte gasped, still catching her breath. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. She felt him shaking, this fierce, powerful king trembling like a leaf because he'd almost lost her. Roman pulled back just enough to look at her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. God, Charlotte, if something had happened to you... It didn't. I'm here. Because you fought back. Because you're brilliant and brave and... He stopped, his eyes searching hers. I can't do this anymore, Charlotte. Her stomach dropped. Do what? Pretend this is just a deal. Pretend I don't... Roman's jaw clenched. The mate bond was never a lie, Charlotte. I felt it the first time I saw you, at Kieran's investigation, when you were arguing with the guards. It hit me like lightning, and I've been fighting it ever since because He stopped, looking away. Because the last time I had a mate bond, my father arranged it, negotiated her like a treaty. Her name was Lissa. His voice went quiet. She was kind. She deserved better than what I could give her, better than a husband who felt nothing when he looked at her except the weight of obligation. We tried for 3 years to make duty feel like love. Charlotte's throat tightened. Roman. When Valdine agents killed her to destabilize my rule, I grieved, but not for her. He finally looked at Charlotte, and the shame in his eyes was devastating. I grieved for the woman I'd failed. For 3 years of her life I'd stolen trying to feel something I never would. The silence stretched between them. I swore I'd never do that again. Never ask someone to love me on command. His voice cracked. But then you happened. And tonight, when I thought I might lose you, I realized I can't keep pretending this is just a deal. You feel the bond, she said softly. Yes, but more than that, I feel you. Your strength, your sharp mind, the way you don't back down even when you're terrified, the way you make me laugh, make me feel like I'm more than just a king. His hand cupped her face. I'm falling for you. I know our deal was temporary. I know you planned to leave, but Charlotte kissed him. She'd meant it to be soft, tentative. But the moment their lips met, something ignited. Roman made a rough sound in his throat and kissed her back with desperate intensity, all the restraint he'd been showing for weeks finally shattering. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer. Charlotte's fingers clutched his shoulders, feeling the hard muscle beneath blood-stained fabric. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, and she could feel his wolf just beneath the surface, possessive, claiming, mine. When they finally broke apart, Roman pressed his forehead to hers. Tell me you feel it too, he said roughly. Tell me I'm not alone in this. You're not alone. Charlotte's voice shook. I didn't want to. I tried not to. But I fell for you anyway. The way you protected me, believed in me, made me feel like I mattered. Roman, The words stuck in her throat. Too big. Too soon. But Roman seemed to understand. You don't have to say it. Not yet. Just... His thumb brushed her lower lip. Don't leave. When this is over, when Valdine is dealt with and you're free to go, stay with me. Be my mate, not because of a deal, but because you want to. Charlotte thought about her plan. Take the gold, find Kieran, disappear. It had seemed so clear 3 weeks ago. Now, looking into Roman's amber eyes, feeling the warmth of his body against hers, that plan felt hollow. Empty. What about Kieran? She asked. I can't just abandon. We'll find him together. I'll devote every resource I have to bringing him home. But Charlotte, Roman's expression was fierce. You're not alone anymore. You don't have to carry this by yourself. Let me help. Let me be your partner. I'm not sure how to do this, Charlotte admitted. We'll figure it out together. Roman kissed her forehead, soft and sweet. I'd rather try and fail with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. Charlotte let herself lean into him, feeling safe and cherished and home. Okay, I'll stay. We'll try. She pulled back to look at him. But Roman, I need honesty. Real partnership. No more protective secrets or half-truths. If we're doing this, we're doing it as equals. Deal. He smiled. That real, genuine smile that lit up his face. Anything else? Yes. Kiss me again. Roman laughed, low and rough and obliged. This kiss was slower, deeper, full of promise. Charlotte melted into it, into him, finally letting herself believe this might actually work. They were interrupted by Marcus clearing his throat from the doorway. Your Majesty, the Valdine forces have retreated. We've secured the fortress. Roman didn't let go of Charlotte. Casualties? 12 wounded? None fatal? Why, enemy lost 30, and we've captured 10 more. Marcus's expression was grim. Alec Harrow escaped, but we're tracking him. Let me know when you find him. Roman's voice was ice. After Marcus left, Charlotte touched Roman's face. You need to address your people. Make sure they're okay. I need to make sure you're okay. I am. Thanks to you. She kissed his cheek. Go be the king they need. I'll be here when you're done. Roman studied her for a long moment, then nodded. This isn't over. Between us, I mean. We have things to discuss. I know. Later. Charlotte pushed him gently toward the door. Go. She watched him leave, then sank onto the bed with shaking legs. Her mind spun through everything that had happened. The attack, Alec's betrayal, Roman's confession. The mate bond was never a lie. Charlotte touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss, and let herself smile. Maybe happily ever after wasn't a fairy tale. Maybe it was just choosing to stay, being brave enough to believe you deserved to be loved. She was still terrified, but for the first time in years, Charlotte wasn't alone in her fear. 3 days later, Marcus found Alec trying to cross the northern border. Roman interrogated him personally. Charlotte wasn't present. Roman had insisted she didn't need to see what happened to people who threatened his mate. But she heard the results. Alec confirmed what they'd suspected. Valdine had orchestrated everything. The treaty demands, Lysa's murder, the seduction of Charlotte, all part of a long game to weaken Roman's rule. They wanted you desperate, Charlotte said that evening as they stood on the battlements watching the sunset. Alone, without allies or someone to trust, a king who could be manipulated. Instead, I got you. Roman's arm was around her waist, holding her close. The thing they didn't count on. What happens now? With Valdine? War, probably. Henrik made it clear they won't accept the treaty's dissolution. They'll keep pushing until I push back. Roman's expression was grim. It won't be easy. I'm not going anywhere, Charlotte said firmly. I know. But Charlotte... He turned her to face him. If fighting starts, this fortress becomes a target. I need you somewhere safe. We already had this argument, Roman. I'm staying. I knew you'd say that. Roman smiled slightly. Which is why I'm going to teach you to fight properly. No more relying on luck and kitchen knives. Charlotte raised her eyebrows. The Alpha King is going to give me combat lessons? The Alpha King is going to make damn sure his mate can defend herself, starting tomorrow. His eyes gleamed. Fair warning, I'm a terrible teacher. Very demanding. I can handle demanding. We'll see. Roman kissed her, slow and thorough. When he pulled back, his expression had softened. I love you, Charlotte. I know it's fast, but I needed you to know. Whatever comes next, war, peace, chaos, I love you. Charlotte's eyes stung. No one had said those words to her since her father died. She'd convinced herself she didn't need them, didn't deserve them. I love you too, she whispered. Even though you're arrogant and overprotective and you have terrible taste in council members. Roman laughed, the sound rich and warm. I'll work on that last part. They stood together as darkness fell, wrapped in each other and the bond humming between them. Charlotte thought about the woman she'd been a month ago, humiliated, alone, convinced she'd never matter to anyone. That woman wouldn't recognize her now, and Charlotte was grateful for it. Grateful for the general's rejection that had pushed her into Roman's path. Grateful for Kieran's coded ledger and her father's old lessons. Grateful for every painful step that had led her here. What are you thinking about? Roman asked. How sometimes the worst moments lead to the best things. Charlotte looked up at him. If Alec hadn't rejected me that night, I would have found another way. Roman's voice was certain. You're my mate, Charlotte. We're always going to find each other. The bond doesn't lie. You really believe that? I do now. He kissed her temple. Come on. Maggie's made dinner, and if we're late, she'll make us regret it. As they walked back inside, Charlotte caught sight of their reflection in a window, Roman's arm around her shoulders, her hand resting on his chest, both of them smiling. They looked like partners, like people who chose each other. The war with Valdine lasted 4 months, brutal, bloody, but ultimately decisive. Roman's forces pushed them back across the border and forced King Aldrich to sign a new treaty, one that explicitly renounced all claims on Roman's kingdom and established firm boundaries. Charlotte spent those months learning to fight, managing fortress logistics, and using her brother's pattern recognition skills to help Roman strategists. She wasn't a warrior, would never be, but she found ways to contribute, to be useful, to be a partner to Roman. And through it all, the bond between them deepened, not because of magic or fate, but because they worked at it, chose it, built something real from the ashes of political convenience. 3 weeks after the treaty signing, Marcus burst into Roman's study where Charlotte was reviewing supply reports. We finally found him. Charlotte's quill clattered to the desk. She didn't need to ask who. Where? Valdine Border Prison, Eastern Fortress. Marcus's expression was grim. Your Majesty, we need to move fast. The treaty gives us access, but— I'm coming, Charlotte said, already standing. Charlotte, Roman started. She met his eyes. Don't tell me it's too dangerous or that I should wait here. That's my brother. I'm coming. Roman studied her for a moment, then nodded. We leave in 10 minutes. The prison was a grim stone structure carved into a cliff face, all narrow windows and iron doors. Charlotte's hands shook as they were led through corridors that stank of mold and human misery. How many prisoners? Roman asked, the Valdine officer escorting them, a sour-faced man who'd made his displeasure at the treaty terms abundantly clear. 43 in this block, the officer said. Your clerk is in the isolation cells. Been there since we brought him in. 2 years. Kieran had been locked in isolation for 2 years. Charlotte's vision swam. Roman's hand found the small of her back. Steady, grounding. They stopped at a heavy wooden door. The officer unlocked it with a key that scraped rust, and the hinges screamed as it swung open. The cell was barely 6 feet across. No window. A bucket in the corner, a thin pallet on the floor. And huddled against the far wall, blinking against the sudden torchlight, Kieran. Charlotte didn't remember moving. One moment she was in the doorway, the next she was on her knees beside him, hands hovering because she was afraid to touch, afraid he might shatter. He was so thin. His clothes hung off a frame that had always been lean, but now looked skeletal. His dark hair, the same shade as hers, was long and matted. Scars crossed his forearms, some old and silver, some newer and still pink. But his eyes— God, his eyes were the same, sharp and gray and still him beneath the exhaustion and pain. Char? His voice cracked on her name. You're real? This isn't— They used to make me think you were here. Tricks. But I'm real. She touched his face with shaking fingers. His skin was too cold, stretched too tight over sharp cheekbones. I'm here. We're taking you home, Kieran. Kieran's eyes filled with tears. I didn't tell them. They wanted to know about the ledger, where I hid the documents. I know you didn't. Charlotte pulled him into her arms, carefully, and felt him collapse against her. He was shaking, or maybe she was. Hard to tell where one ended and the other began. She felt him start to cry, silent, shuddering sobs that racked his too thin frame. Charlotte held him tighter, her own tears streaming down her face. I looked for you, she whispered. Every day for 2 years. I never stopped. I know. I knew you wouldn't. He pulled back enough to look at her face, his hands coming up to frame her cheeks like he needed to confirm she was solid. You found the ledger, the code. I knew if anyone could, it would be you. Actually— Charlotte glanced back at Roman, who stood in the doorway with Marcus, giving them space. Roman helped. It's completed. Kieran's gaze followed hers, sharpening despite his weakened state. His eyes traveled over Roman, taking in the fine clothes, the bearing, the way he watched Charlotte with fierce protectiveness. It looks pretty simple from here. Kieran's mouth curved, just barely, but it was a smile, the first she'd seen from him in 2 years. Then his expression grew serious. "Did you break the treaty? Is that why you could come for me?" "We found your father's addendum," Roman said, speaking for the first time. He stepped into the cell, and Charlotte felt Kieran tense beside her. "Your code led us to it." "You saved the kingdom, Kieran. I just hid some papers." Kieran's voice was hoarse. "You're the one who came for me, forced Valdine to honor the treaty terms and release prisoners." He studied Roman. "Why? I'm just a clerk who stumbled onto something. You're Charlotte's brother." Roman's gaze was steady. "That's reason enough." The silence stretched. Charlotte watched her brother process this, saw the exact moment he understood what Roman was really saying. "You're in love with my sister," Kieran said quietly. "Yes." It wasn't a question, but Roman answered anyway. Firm, certain, like it was the simplest truth in the world. Kieran looked at Charlotte. She nodded, feeling her throat tighten. "Does he treat you well?" Kieran asked. "Better than well," Charlotte managed. "Does he make you happy?" "Yes." "Good." Kieran's attention returned to Roman, and despite his weakened state, his voice carried an edge. "Then you should know, she's the best person I've ever known. Loyal, to her bones. If you hurt her, if you take her for granted or make her feel small, I'll find a way to make you regret it. King or not." Roman's mouth curved slightly. "I'd expect nothing less. And for what it's worth, I plan to spend every day earning her. She deserves nothing less." Kieran studied him for another long moment, then nodded. "All right then." He swayed slightly, and Charlotte caught him. "We need to get you to a healer," she said. "I can walk." "Kieran, I've been sitting in this cell for 2 years, Char. I'm walking out of it." His jaw set in that stubborn way she remembered. "But maybe you could help. Just a little." Charlotte slipped under his arm, taking most of his weight as he struggled to stand. His legs nearly buckled, but Roman was there, on Kieran's other side, supporting him without making it obvious. "Ready?" Roman asked. "Get me out of here," Kieran said with a faint grin. They walked him through the corridors. Slow progress, Kieran's breathing labored but determined. The other prisoners watched through their cell doors. Some called out, asking if more releases were coming. Charlotte felt each plea like a knife to her chest. "We'll send negotiators," Roman said quietly to Marcus. "Everyone held without proper charges. I want a full review." Outside, the sunlight was blinding. Kieran stopped at the threshold, his face tilted up to the sky like he'd forgotten what the sun felt like. 2 years, he said softly. "I thought I'd never see daylight again." Charlotte's grip on him tightened. They'd brought a carriage for the journey home. Roman helped Kieran inside, where cushions and blankets had been prepared. A healer was already waiting, a woman named Sarah, with gentle hands and a no-nonsense manner. "I need to examine him," Sarah said, looking at Charlotte. "I'm staying," Charlotte said. "Charlotte." Kieran's hand caught hers. "It's all right. Go ride with your king. I'll still be here when we get home. Promise? Promise." He squeezed her fingers. "I'm not going anywhere. Not again." The journey back took 6 hours. Charlotte rode with Roman, unable to sit still, checking the carriage every 30 minutes until Roman finally pulled her into his arms. "He's all right," Roman said against her hair. "Sarah would tell us if he wasn't." "I know, I can't believe he's really here, that he's alive." She pulled back to look at Roman's face. "Thank you for finding him, for making Valdine honor the treaty terms, for you don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You could have just sent soldiers, but you came yourself. You stood in that cell and looked my brother in the eye and—" Her voice broke. Roman cupped her face in his hands. "I would do anything for you, Charlotte. Anything. Finding your brother, facing down a kingdom, walking into that prison, it's nothing compared to what you've given me. What have I given you? Hope." His thumb brushed away a tear on her cheek. "Purpose. Love. You've given me everything that matters." Charlotte kissed him. Then, soft and salt-tinged and full of gratitude and relief. "When we get home," she said, "I need time with Kieran, to help him heal, to—" "Take all the time you need," Roman said. "I'm not going anywhere." At the fortress, Maggie had prepared a suite of rooms for Kieran, close to Charlotte's chambers, but with his own space. A bath had been drawn, fresh clothes laid out, food prepared. Kieran emerged from the bath an hour later, clean and dressed in soft linen. He still looked too thin, and the haunted quality hadn't left his eyes, but he seemed more solid, more real. Charlotte had been pacing the sitting room. She spun when he entered. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm dreaming." Kieran lowered himself carefully into a chair. "This is really your home now? This fortress?" "Yes. I can see he loves you." Kieran's voice was soft. "The way he looked at you in that prison, like you were his whole world." He paused. "I'm happy for you, Char. Truly. You deserve this. So do you, Kieran. Happiness. Safety. Home." Charlotte leaned forward. "You're staying here. We'll get you well, find you work you actually enjoy, not dusty archives. And Kieran?" She waited until he met her eyes. "You're not alone anymore. You have me, and you have Roman's protection. No one is taking you again." Kieran's eyes welled. "I was so scared," he whispered. "In that cell, in the dark. I kept thinking about you, wondering if you were safe, if you'd found the ledger, if you were still looking for me, or if you'd given up. Never." Charlotte moved to kneel beside his chair, taking his hands. "I never gave up. Not for a single day. I know. I should have known." He squeezed her hands. "We're a team, right? Always have been. Always will be." They sat like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, hands clasped, two orphans who'd only ever had each other and had somehow found their way back together. A soft knock at the door. Roman entered, carrying a tray of food himself rather than sending a servant. "Thought you might be hungry," he said to Kieran. "Maggie made your sister's favorites, and Charlotte mentioned you have the same taste." Kieran looked at the tray. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables and butter, and apple tart for dessert. Simple food, but clearly made with care. "Thank you," Kieran said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "For all of it. The rescue, the room, the food. For loving my sister. I know I threatened you earlier, but—" "You were protecting her," Roman said simply. "I respect that. I do the same. I can see why she chose you." Kieran managed a small smile. "Sit. Both of you. Tell me everything. How you met. How this all happened. I want the whole story." So they sat, Charlotte on the arm of Kieran's chair, Roman in the seat across, and told him everything. The ballroom humiliation, the dramatic claiming, the ledger and the treaty and the war. Kieran asked sharp questions, his mind already working despite his physical exhaustion. "You were brilliant," he said when they reached the part about cracking his code. "I knew if anyone could figure it out, it'd be you." "Team effort," Charlotte said, echoing his earlier words. "I had help. From your king." Kieran looked at Roman. "You must be good at codes too." "Your sister is better," Roman said simply. "I just provided the context." Kieran smiled. A real one this time. "I I think I'm going to like having you as a brother." Charlotte's heart squeezed. She looked at Roman and found him watching her with such tenderness it made her breath catch. "Get some rest," Roman said to Kieran, standing. "We'll talk more tomorrow." And Kieran, welcome home. After they left, Charlotte and Roman walked hand in hand to their chambers. She was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, but also lighter than she'd felt in 2 years. "Thank you again," she said again when they reached their rooms. "For today. For him." "Stop thanking me," Roman said gently. "He's family now. Your family is my family." Charlotte pulled him down into a kiss, slow and deep, and full of everything she couldn't put into words. When they parted, Roman pressed his forehead to hers. "He's going to be all right," Roman said. "It'll take time, but he's strong, like you." "We're going to help him heal," Charlotte said firmly. "All of us together." "Together," Roman agreed, and kissed her. It started soft, gentle. Charlotte's fingers found the laces of his shirt, and Roman made a low sound against her mouth, walking her backward until her legs hit the bed. They'd done this before, many times over the past months, but somehow it kept reaching new heights as their bond deepened. Roman's hands were reverent as he undressed her, his mouth following the path of bare skin he revealed. Charlotte arched into his touch, into the heat of him, and when he finally settled between her thighs, she was already trembling. "I've got you," he murmured against her throat, and slid home. The mate bond sang between them, had been since that first kiss, a constant hum beneath her ribs. But now, as they moved together, it blazed brighter. Every touch amplified, every sensation doubled and reflected back. Charlotte could feel her own pleasure and his, a feedback loop that built and built until she couldn't tell where she ended, and he began. She came apart gasping his name, and felt him follow her over the edge moments later, his face buried in her neck. They lay tangled together afterward, hearts still racing, skin damp with sweat. Roman's fingers traced lazy patterns on her hip. "It keeps getting better," Charlotte said, half dazed. "Every time, I think it can't possibly, and then it does." The bond deepens. Roman pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "The more we trust each other, the more we feel." Charlotte turned in his arms to face him, found him watching her with an expression that made her chest flutter. "Marry me," he said. She blinked. "What?" "Marry me. Make it official. Not just the mate bond, but a real marriage, partners in everything." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I know we said we'd take things slow, but Charlotte, I don't want to wait. I want the world to know you're mine, and I'm yours." "You're serious?" "Completely." 6 months ago, she would have panicked, would have felt the old instinct to run, to protect herself from wanting something this much. But she was learning that some things were worth the risk. "Yes, I'll marry you." She watched his expression shift from disbelief to joy. "Wait, did you really think I'd say no? I thought you'd want time to think about it. I've had 6 months to think." She kissed him, soft and sure. "I'm certain." "I love you, Roman. Let's do this. The wedding, the partnership, the whole terrifying, beautiful mess of it." Roman's answering kiss was deep and claiming, and before long they were reaching for each other again, slower this time, savoring, learning the new landscape of engaged, of promised, of forever. Outside, the fortress settled into sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, rebuilding after war, navigating court, politics, planning a royal wedding. But tonight, wrapped in each other, they had everything they needed. How would you rate this story from 1 to 10? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts, And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.